On today's episode, we're talking about public libraries in Irving that are paid for by your tax dollars, and are they safe for your kids?
Another issue of the Irving Herald is off the press. First copies of Irving's newspaper were distributed the very day lots were auctioned off to start the city of Irving.
We're at the library. Interesting setting, I guess, because there's been a lot that's been going on in the city of Irving over the past few years, pertaining not just the city of Irving, really, just throughout the entire country, with what's going on with our public libraries. So, Philip, if you could maybe give us a brief history of the library issue.
Sure. Yeah, and this is a hot topic which came up at City Council, the last City Council meeting. Although you wouldn't know it because they bumped public comments to the end of the agenda and did not live stream them, so they were not recorded.
Oh, interesting.
So the back and forth on citizens about the library was cut off, and they announced this, and it was a little bit of a put down maybe of the citizens. Dennis Webb made the motion and said, this public comment's getting in the way of our meeting. It kind of rubbed me the wrong way when he said it. But it was a good decision because there were 19 public comments and a short agenda. So they were able to do the agenda and then move to the public comments. And there were a lot of public comments that were kind of rough, that were not on the library, but a number of public comments on the library. And there was the meeting of the Community Services and Public Safety Committee of the council that morning. So that's why we're talking about the library today. And this issue that's been going on in Irving for 6 years now, and has been going on throughout Texas and throughout the nation, of mature content for children. Mature content for children.
Yeah, I don't know if mature is, that's the word that they would use, right? I don't know if mature is the right word to use for this, but maybe sexually explicit, maybe you could even say propagandistic. Maybe there's a variety of ways you could describe what mature content really means. I wouldn't necessarily call it mature.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. Let's call it what it is. Sexually explicit.
Yeah.
And it's funny. Comments with people defending the library will talk about what libraries mean and how important they are to children. Children are the major group they're serving when they do events. It's large majority of it for children. And I was thinking about this morning and the impact of the books that I read as a child on me, and how they stayed with me and affected me. There's one biography of George Custer that just opened my world, and we know the impact that can have.
Oh, for sure.
I don't think that exposure as a child to sexually explicit material is something that as an adult you look back on fondly. I think, boy, that just really had a big impact.
It was
on my life.
It was really good for my formation, intellectual, social, emotional. Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's if most adults, at least the mature adults, right, if we're going to use the word correctly, would look back and say anything that prevented or perverted my sentimentality, that I wish I could go back and just kind of erase that from my history.
Right.
I wish I could have taken that away, because what could have been, what would my life have been like if I had been exposed, if I had not been exposed to that, if I had been exposed to something better that would have, helped me develop in a more, not to repeat myself, but in a more mature way.
Right.
Yeah.
And for those who volunteer with children, do safe environment training, that's part of the training, is the excuses that child predators kind of give for their actions is, it's educational. You have to learn about sex, and I'm going to help teach you about sex. So similar arguments here with sexually explicit content.
And again, this is such a controversial topic. It shouldn't be controversial because it's, I think that the vast majority of people probably agree. But, as it's well known, the Irving Herald, we are members of the Families for Irving PAC. You and I both have multiple children. How many children? You have 7 children, correct? I have 5. So some would say that, we're not, well, I would say we're not heteronormative. Maybe we're heterofanatical, in that sense, like extremely heterosexual guys right here, and exercising our heterosexuality in a way. But it is. I think it's important that people understand like what our perspective is on this, and it's not to say that like children shouldn't be educated about these things, but these things are very sensitive topics. They're very intimate topics, right? And so they really should be taught within the family, and it should be taught in an age appropriate way.
Right.
And how they're exposed to these things should be done so at the loving, charitable guidance from their parents throughout their childhood, right? It's not like just, I think when I was growing up, the idea of like the topic of sex, it was like one big talk, right? That was the idea, or like that they would always say, well, have you had the talk yet? And I think that's just going about it all wrong. Like this idea that you're going to have like this one talk with your kid and explain everything. No, I mean, like this is an education that you gradually get exposed to more understanding what the truth and the beauty of human sexuality as you grow older. And what we're trying to do as families in this community is trying to make sure that children have that opportunity that have that blessing of understanding sexuality in its truest context, not perverted in a way that's going to put them, set them astray, put them in a situation where their life is not going to go as well because you've planted some very bad seeds early on in their childhood.
And so it's an innocent population, a vulnerable population, and a population that's become prey for big financial interests. It's the publishers that have been pushing this. Is why it's not just happening here, it's throughout the nation.
Yeah.
These big publishers around 2016 just started churning out these books with this explicit content, and they had a built-in market for it. Yeah. So libraries, especially the American Library Association, has gone totally woke, and that's their agenda.
Yeah.
The more of this, the better. And so you have a market for those books, and so the publishers just start churning out, and they start appearing on library shelves throughout the country.
Yeah, before this podcast, like I said, we're at the library, so I spent about half an hour just kind of wandering the shelves of the YA section. It's cordoned off from everything else. It's in its own glass room, and actually there's signs there that discourage parents from going in there. Get out of here. This is for teens only. So that's a little alarming in and of itself. I'm sure that there's probably maybe some good intentions behind that, and we can get into that in a minute. But at the same time, though, I just I picked up a handful of books and just kind of feathered through them, and the only conclusion that I can reach is like, first of all, I don't care whether these books are sexually explicit or not. Like, I don't want my kids reading these books, like on the one hand, because like they're not good books. Like they're not particularly interesting. Some of them are tittillating. Like there's a lot of romance, which we would call maybe heteronormative romance, right? If we're going to use that term. But they're not they're to be honest, I think they're below a teenager's reading level, what should be a teenager's reading level. My kids are reading, like my kids aren't even teenagers yet, and they're reading books a lot more advanced than what I saw in the YA section, of the library. Yeah. But I also think too that like probably 99% of these books probably would not exist if it hadn't been for these like these artificial market conditions created by the public library purchasing system.
It's a captive market.
Yeah. I just don't imagine that these books would you put these books up for sale at Barnes and Noble. I can't imagine that most of them would really sell or be profitable. They're probably not worth the pages that the paper that they're printed on.
And part of that is the library profession. So the ALA is setting the tone. But my wife served as a school librarian for 2 years.
Oh, okay.
So she subscribed on social media to all the groups of online discussions of school librarians. And it was just nonstop pushing an agenda of we have got to get more explicit content to children. More. So the librarians that are the loudest voices on these nationwide social media discussion groups were just pushing junk. So you've got this combination, this captive market, this very woke organization with an agenda, hiding behind, well, we're a bunch of professionals with professional standards, and they aren't. Yeah. Even the term young adult itself, that is a propaganda term. What does that mean? Well, again, you go down to the young adult section like you just did. What does it say? Grade 6 and up. So that is an 11-year-old. So I don't think anybody is calling an 11-year-old a young adult, right? That's a propaganda term.
Correct.
So they're using these terms, and when they're called out on it, like Councilman Dennis Webb will say, "Now wait a minute, how are you using these terms?" Sixth grader, like, "You're not a professional. You don't know. We use these terms." It is really, in the history of this issue in Irving, this shell game. Well, they will pretend, library director, staff, what they're doing is pretending to do things to protect children, and they aren't honest about it, and they aren't actually protecting children. And we saw that in the young adult section.
Yeah.
It is, the quality is, you don't want your children in there actually reading the books. It's all romance novels. Yeah. And it will say the different genres of sci-fi or fantasy, but it's just romance novels in those contexts. So, and then a very slim section on nonfiction, which is a lot of homosexual, how to be a gay kid, and then other pieces of propaganda.
This one I didn't find it in the YA section. I found it in the graphic novel section, and it's actually not cordoned off. It's just in the general area. Like, it was actually probably sitting about 3 feet above the ground. So, my 7-year-old, actually my 3-year-old, who's like, probably 36 inches high, could probably reach up and grab this. My 7-year-old, it'd be about eye height. I could very easily, like, graphic novels, kids are attracted to these because, like, there's not a lot of reading involved. It's mostly just a bunch of pictures. But some of the ideas, like, again, I know this is one of these, like, sensational books that's, like, really made the rounds in terms of getting national attention as far as to how graphic and obscene it is. But it's talking about, like, somebody's identifying as a different sex than they were born with. It talks about masturbation. Here you got a picture of, like, two. I don't know if, can I show this? It's basically a picture of, like, two naked dudes kissing each other. I don't know. I'm not going to put it on the picture.
And that's on children's height.
Yeah,
that's
it's a drawing. It's a drawing. I'm not showing him, like, photographs of it, but I mean, this is basically like graphic. Some of this stuff is graphic pornography. I mean, very tittillating,
and it's for children. It's depicting children.
It's and it's not, this is not sanctioned off. Like, anybody could pick this up. I picked it up. I actually made it very clear as I was walking down the aisle, like, holding it up. Like, I'm not hiding this. I don't want to make anybody think that I'm trying to, like, hide. No, I am very explicitly, like, I am carrying this thing around because I don't want people to think that I'm trying to be weird about it or whatever the case may be.
So the library's current policies is, hey, censorship. It says on their website, censorship is an individual matter. Like, it's not up to us. Well, now, come on. Now you're turning off families from bringing their children to the library. And I know a lot of families, the kids will say, well, our parents don't allow us to go to the library. So now you are making the library unsafe for children. The whole idea of serving children, expanding their minds, and the impact that reading can have. And you don't want to make any judgments. You want to follow this philosophy of the American Library Association. Everyone should access all content. That is just not what a public library that's getting public tax dollars should do, is declare independence from the Irving City Council and the direction of council, which does not want that, which is responsive to citizens who say, hey, we don't want these books on the shelves. There's a woman at City Council who came to the last City Council meeting because her child picked a book off the shelf, and she's like, what is this? So that's what we're facing. Now, the library, this has been going on for years. They're doing this collection modification project. So maybe we can talk about that.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
So the idea is to, get this mature content, explicit content away from children. And it has been recalcitrance at every turn. I mean, if you go to one of these library board meetings, it is very eye-opening how they are not interested in doing that, in protecting children. They're committed to this philosophy of anybody should be able to access anything. If you want to censor things, that's your own individual decision. It is not up to us to protect children. And council is trying to bring them along. No, it's not. You are receiving tax dollars. You are not declaring independence from our democratic system.
Well, and that is sort of the original argument where this all sort of spurned from, is that this was a free speech idea, which again to me is a little bit, I don't know, it's kind of a perversion of the First Amendment. This idea that somebody has a right to absorb certain types of speech, right? Like that a public library or any public institution has a duty, to provide certain types of speech. So this actually came up recently as a court case in Llano County. Am I pronouncing it right?
2022. Yep.
In 2022. I guess before we even get into that, though, I should preface it that this has been an issue, for various city council races. Many people know I ran for city council in District 7 in 2022, and this was one of the big issues that was being discussed at that time. And there was a lot of discussion about this is before the Llano County case was actually heard. This is several months before that, and it was a very contentious issue. I mean, I remember seeing kind of my name being lambasted online, like that I was for censorship. I remember somebody even accused me of wanting to ban To Kill a Mockingbird, which is a great American novel. Every high schooler should read it. It's a great, insight into our history, right? But at the same time, it was just completely obfuscating, what the real issue was. What we were really trying to accomplish is we were trying to protect the innocence of children, and also, how many books have been written and published throughout the history of man? I mean, probably millions, right? I mean, I don't know what that number would be. Maybe I should have asked, ChatGPT before we started what that number is. But we know that the Irving City Library system is not going to be able to carry every book that's ever existed, right? I mean, even the Library of Congress is not going to be able to do that. It's certainly not going to be able to buy every book that's ever been published. So this idea that somehow that the city library system is, I guess you could say, compelled, that they have to purchase all these different types of books, it is a bit just, I don't know what the right word to say is, just it's a bit absurd.
Makes no sense.
It doesn't really make any sense, but that was the argument, right? And that was sort of kind of the prevailing wisdom at the time, even though it wasn't really well thought through. So Llano County, they basically argued this case, and the ruling eventually came down that yes, city governments, libraries that are directed by city governments, they have the right to pick and choose what items are going to be purchased for their own library systems. They shouldn't be compelled to have to purchase certain types of books. And thank God that they came to this ruling, right? Because it was just, can you imagine the contrary? Can you imagine how exhausting that would be to have to provide certain types of speech that may or may not even exist, but somehow you have to provide certain types of speech for certain types of groups. This was obviously appealed. The Texas Supreme Court upheld it, and I think it was appealed again to the Supreme Court. And then the Supreme Court, as recently as last month, December of 2025, decided not to take the case, which means that the ruling stands.
Right.
So
it's government speech, so it's not a First Amendment issue.
Yeah,
not a First Amendment issue.
And before this all came about, right, there was a lot of just kind of fear and trepidation, I guess you could say, from the city's attorney's office about our city council taking any bold action in regards to these obscene books, right? Can we first of all, can we dispose of them? Can we not purchase them in the future? Can we lock them away or put them in a section that only adults, of certain ages can actually check out? There's all kinds of ways in which you can attack this problem that helps protect the innocence of children. but they were very, fearful to take it on because they didn't want to be sued. They didn't want to have to defend this position.
Well, they have lots of excuses.
Lots of excuses. Yeah.
At every turn, there's an excuse why we can't do things.
Yeah.
And yet, why can't we be like Arlington? Arlington says, "Oh, well, you have justified complaints here," and they work with the public. And there is no working with the public. There is no working with the library board. There is no working with the council, and that's starting to be a problem.
Yeah, especially the council, right? Because they're supposed to take direction from council. I will give the devil his due here, right? That if you are going to tackle this issue, maybe it's best to do it in Llano County. Maybe it's best to do it in Tarrant County, right? Mm-hmm. You try to fight that issue in Dallas County. Venue is everything. Well, maybe not everything, but venue is a huge factor as to whether or not your litigation could be successful or not. Things could have gone sideways in Dallas County for sure, right? So I can sort of understand why they might want to let Llano County take the lead. The fighter in me, the part of me that kind of desires to be great and courageous, would have loved to have seen our city kind of be the tip of the spear in terms of that and actually set an example for the country. Was that the prudent thing to do? Maybe it was. I don't know. But I'm not even sure if that was the intent of the city attorney's office. I really don't know. All I know is thank God for Llano County and thank God for that ruling, right?
Well, it does change things.
It does.
It means there's no more excuse. There's no more excuse of, oh, we're going to get sued. Oh, this isn't legal. Oh, there's First Amendment claim. It's not a First Amendment issue. And the whole idea of banning books is such a red herring. And I invite people to check that out on ChatGPT. Is there a single book that is banned
in the United
States of America?
Yeah, I mean,
no.
You can go check out Mein Kampf. I wouldn't be surprised if our library had a copy of Mein Kampf somewhere.
Not a single book is banned.
Yeah.
Not a single book is banned. We're not talking about that. We're talking about protecting children and these sexually explicit books for children. And they're getting them hand over fist. I mean, the books that they are acquiring since the library director took over as library director, I mean, it is about 1 in every 5 teens and children's books, upwards of 1 in every 5 are these controversial books. They just keep on acquiring and acquiring and acquiring. And there's really no process to reconsider. So the current process, if what happens, which just happened last week, what happened when we were walking around just now, we're pulling books out, we're like, whoa, look at this. This is available to children and at child's level and in a graphic novel section that they would be looking.
And it's you don't have to check out the book. This book has not been checked out. This book is still in library circulation, right? So I'm planning on putting it back on the shelf. I don't want to. I personally like to burn it, but I will do the respectable thing and I will put it back on the shelf before I leave here today. But yeah, I mean, it's
so when you find that,
there.
When you find that and you say, okay, this should be reconsidered, there's a whole process and it goes nowhere. It goes nowhere. Yeah. It goes to a committee of librarians, and then the library director is the ultimate authority. So nothing has ever been reconsidered. So as a result, nobody fills out that form because that goes nowhere. So really, it's what council is looking at changing. That was a discussion at the Community Services and Public Safety Committee meeting of how do we change this so it's not just the library director in charge of everything. And therefore, if she's recalcitrant, which she is, Lynette Robertson, recalcitrant, her agenda is getting as many of these books as possible and trying to outfox the board and outfox council. No, we want citizen representation as the ultimate authority. So library board members would be, according to the draft that they were looking at and considering at the meeting, would be with the director in making that final determination. Hey, is this an inappropriate book that should be pulled? But ultimately, I mean, it's a farce. It's a farce. The whole collection modification project.
There's just so many of these books too. There's so many of them that are being pushed by the American Library Association. Those that have studied library science that are sort of working in these roles of directors of libraries. They're encouraged to buy these books. It's a deep-seated problem. It really is, I mean, don't get me wrong. Like I think that these processes, these committees, this is a good step in the right direction, but it's
well,
yeah.
I mean, but they're not serious about it, is what I'm saying.
Yeah,
they're not serious about it. If there's ways to make the library safe for kids, this is public money, we're a democratic system. Be responsive to council saying we need to make the library safe for kids. Yeah. Arlington does it. There's ways to do that.
Yeah.
And so they have, but at every turn they will just deflect, delay, obfuscate.
Yeah.
And these library board meetings are very eye-opening. Watching the director do this, have excuses at every turn.
Yeah.
So the latest collection modification project, they're supposedly moving these books. Well, where are they supposed to move them? They're supposed to move them behind the desk, so the librarian is monitoring. It's still accessible, but it would be in this YA plus section. So if you had a restricted library card, you wouldn't be able to check it out as monitored. But we're here in the South Library, and the YA plus is not behind. They say, well, there's not enough room for it. So it's right across from the elevators. It's the most prominent part in the entire library is where they put it. Yeah. And they're like, well, we don't have the space. We can't monitor it. And Mark Cronin on council is kind of taking the lead on this. And this has been going on for years, and it's one excuse after another. And then they pull stunts like this where they're defying the council.
So I meant to address this a little bit earlier in the discussion, but why are they so defiant? What is it about it? And I spent some time kind of contemplating this, because I think, at the Irving Herald, we try to be charitable to the other side, meaning that we're not going to go and attack strawmen, right? We're going to present the best. We're going to present their argument as best as we possibly can. Maybe even try to argue it even better than they are, right? But I think there is this deep-seated belief that LGBTQ plus people, they come into this world, right? It's kind of been something that's ingrained on their soul, right? And they're born in this world, and that the only way that they can really come to discover who they truly are is if they find a way to break out of the heteronormative world, which again, I would just call that the normal world. I wouldn't call it heteronormative. That's their word, not mine, right? It's their piece of propaganda. But, at the same time, though, it's like, okay, if I'm, a heteronormative person, right? Or a normal person, as I would say, I still want my kids to have a childlike innocence. I still want my kids to be, kind of introduced to sexuality, at an age-appropriate level, gradually in a loving environment, preferably by their parents. That's the ideal situation. Even if somebody is born, even if this is somehow ingrained on their soul, right, that they are LGBTQ+, that this is their true self, wouldn't you also want to afford them that same innocence? I don't know. It just boggles my mind that you're wanting to really, expose these kids in particular, right? These kids that are supposedly very fragile, very systematically oppressed, not just by the culture and world that we live in, but by nature itself, right, is oppressed. Like, wouldn't you also want to afford them that same sense of childlike innocence and wonder? I don't. That's the part that I really don't quite understand, right? Like, why do they think that just because they're LGBTQ plus in theory, right? Again, that's their perspective, not mine. Why would they want to expose them to this stuff so early in their life? If it's the only thing that I can really gather from that is that they understand that that people can be influenced into this lifestyle, right? And so it is a propaganda tool.
Yeah,
that's my conclusion.
Well, here's what the director would say to you, and this whole idea of protecting children from explicit sexual material. She would say, well, there's books in the library that I disagree with. That's what she would say. Total moral relativism. Total. Sure. Who are you to say? Who would you say? There kind of is no truth. That's the answer. Mm-hmm. And at the same time she's saying that, she's saying, well, I'm the ultimate decider. If you can go ahead and challenge it, but I will decide. And then, of course, there's never been a reconsideration that's successful. Mm-hmm. But to give her due, she is also representing the staff. So in some sense, I do wonder whether any library director. I mean, you have to fight for your people. You have to fight for the staff and what they believe. And if this is, I don't know what the general tenor and ethos of the library staff is, but she could very well be representing a staff who believes, what they've been taught is the professional standards of their profession, the ALA, which is everybody should have access to everything. This idea of you're talking about protecting child innocence, nope. Expose.
Yeah, it's not part of their ethos. Yeah, agreed. Which goes to show this is a problem much greater than just what's going on in the city of Irving, right? This is a very deep-seated problem. It affects the ALA and probably a lot of other institutions as well. Well, not probably, definitively other institutions as well.
The director is, ultimately though, the director is responsible.
Yeah.
More and more people are distancing themselves from her because this has become such a farce and so ridiculous. She can't look the chair of the library board in the eyes. When she gave her presentation, she was talking so slowly because she wanted to eke it out so she wouldn't be able to take any questions and there wouldn't be discussions.
I thought she was inebriated.
Okay. You almost thought she was on something. But no, she just didn't want
to. She was trying to run out the clock. Okay. Yeah. That, kind of, again, I wouldn't call that the most mature strategy.
It's a good strategy.
But
you don't want to take questions.
Well, the truth is, look, if you're very secure in your position, if you believe ultimately that you're right, and you have the rhetoric and the rationale to defend your position, you don't need to silence the other side, right? You can just have an open discussion. You can have an open discussion, right? And so, speaking of which, if anybody is watching this and it disagrees with us and would like to have an open discussion on this, we would love to have you on our podcast. Come over here and we will talk it out, and you can bring a partner, so it's 2-on-2. That's fine. I'd love to have a discussion because I'd like to know more about this position. I'd like to understand it better, and maybe we can have an open and forthright discussion about what is best for our children. Right?
I don't know if anybody's going to take you up on that, Bryan.
Well, let's see what happens, right? you never know unless you try. So.
Well, I've got one more important thing for everybody to know of what's going to happen. Well, first on the policy side, so the libraries board is going to meet and continue this process of changing the collection policy as we're just getting all of these books. 15 to 20% of these children's and teens books are this content. So they're trying to change that. They're trying to change the reconsideration policy. As far as policy that's being implemented, there is going to be a change everybody should be aware of on February 20. So on February 20, all youth library cards that haven't been renewed since October will need to be renewed. They'll expire and need to be renewed. Now, this is part of the shell game I'm talking about. So it's this idea of now we're having age-restricted library cards. Now we're going to protect children from checking out inappropriate books. But when you look into the details of that, it's a complete farce because there are 3 levels. There is full access, limited teen, and limited children's. And so what that means is limited children's, you can only check out children's section. Limited teens, you can only check out teen section. And then full, you can check out adult. So what that means is teens can't check out everything that's worthwhile in the library.
You can't check out To Kill a Mockingbird.
You're limited to all the books you would actually need to do your reports and learn things you can't check out. You're limited to the romance novels. And the ridiculous propaganda and this tight collection. So it was done with this idea of it's portrayed as, hey, we're age-limiting library cards. We're responsive to these concerns about children. And actually, they aren't. Actually, who would do that? Who would say, well, no, you can't actually get the good stuff. You're restricted to the romance novels.
No.
Yeah, it's
so every parent is going to be like, well, no, I'm not going to. I want my kid to have access to, the encyclopedia, to, any real book that, all the nonfiction, everything that you need to do any research. But yeah, it's kind of a clever move, I guess you could say. It's very, now that's kind of out in the open. It's very transparent. Hopefully council sees through it. hopefully that gets struck down and a better process is put in place.
Yeah.
But
I don't know how that happens without a new library director. I mean, it's been 6 years of this.
It's time.